After a 2-year wait, I decided to allow my children, Becca, Carter, and Luke, to meet the Braswell elders shortly before I married Joseph, so that we could start married life peacefully. Disney World was the agreed-upon place. I adjusted my sunglasses and surveyed the bustling crowds. The Florida heat pressed against my skin, but it wasn't the temperature making me uncomfortable. It was the impending meeting. Luke tugged at my sleeve, his 7-year-old enthusiasm undimmed by the heat. "Mom, can I get a Mickey ice cream?" He had to be kidding. Ice cream before meeting the Braswells in his new clothes? I shook my head as I looked him over. What was I thinking, buying this kid a white shirt for such an important meeting? The last thing I needed was criticism from a bunch of people I'd never met. "After we meet your grandmother," I replied, smoothing his hair. "Remember what we talked about?" Carter, my 8-year-old middle child, nodded solemnly. "Best behavior. No asking for stuff. Don't mention Dad and his wife and kids." I winced. Not exactly how I phrased it, but close enough. Beside me, 11-year-old Becca rolled her eyes with the particular expertise of a preteen. "I don't see why we have to meet those people at all. We've been fine without them for my entire life." I couldn't argue with that logic. The Braswell family had shown some interest in Anthony's children with me, but not much until they heard about my engagement to Joseph. Something had changed, and suddenly the wealthy barbecue dynasty wanted to connect with their legacy, as the formal email had put it. "There they are," I murmured, spotting the group near Cinderella's castle. Even in casual clothes, the Braswells carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to influence, but I was sure each item cost more than my winter gas bill. Rebecca Braswell Reardon, Anthony's mother, stepped forward first. Her silver hair was expertly styled, and her flowery sundress complemented her skin tone well. "So these are Anthony's other children," she said, her gaze appraising each one before settling on Becca. You're the spitting image of my mother." I snorted. This child looked like her. "Why do they talk like that?" Luke asked. "It's a southern accent, honey," I soothed. "You'll get used to it, but don't mimic them. You're Midwestern and speak just fine." Behind Rebecca stood her father, ancient but still imposing, and her 3 brothers, Thomas, Alan, and Jacob III, called Junior. "Come here, girl," Alan beckoned to Becca. My daughter glanced at me and I nodded despite my misgivings. Alan boomed, "You have the Braswell chin. Strong. Determined. That means there's business sense in your bones." The introductions continued with the great-grandfather, whom everyone called Boss, examining each child with intense, unsettling interest. "The boys take after you," Rebecca said to me, showing her disappointment. "But Rebecca here, she's a Braswell through and through." "It's Becca," my daughter corrected. "Nobody calls me Rebecca even when I'm in trouble because that's not my name." Rebecca's smile tightened. "In our family we use proper names. Rebecca is a dignified name for a future businesswoman." I felt my doctor's composure slipping. "Like she said," I answered, looking Rebecca head-on. "That's not her name. She's Becca Anais Reardon, and by the way, all 3 have Braswell blood. Consult the DNA reports." Rebecca snorted and said, "I'm aware they truthfully revealed my son's indiscretions. I'm just thinking of her future. Children need guidance. Becca can decide what she wants to be called and she chooses her birth name." "Of course," Rebecca replied tightly. "Tony has told me all of her academic achievements, and with her natural aptitude, it would be a shame to waste the Braswell business acumen. We're prepared to set up a trust for her education, providing it includes business and hospitality courses." Before I could respond, Anthony, accompanied by Crystal and all her brown hair, was herding 4 boys like a squadron. "Dad!" Luke exclaimed, breaking the tension by hugging Anthony's legs. "Marisol." Anthony nodded, lifting Luke, his military bearing still evident despite the Disney World setting. "You look good. Different." "It's the lack of sleep deprivation," I replied dryly. "Finishing residency helps with that, Anthony." Thomas called, "Tony, these young men are as strapping as the ones with your wife. Fancy you having 7 kids." "Tony should get himself fixed," Junior muttered. 7 is more than enough." Crystal stepped forward. "Hello, Marisol. Thanks for this meeting. These are our boys, TJ, Everett, Walker, and Colin. Boys, say hello to Miss Marisol." Those introductions were awkward, with Anthony's sons from his marriage eyeing their half-siblings cautiously. I watched as Anthony engaged with our children, noting how easily he slipped back into their lives despite his infrequent visits. The Braswell family clustered around them, with Rebecca and her brothers paying particular attention to Becca. "Has Becca shown any interest in cooking?" Junior asked. "The sauce recipe is a family secret, but blood is blood and she should know it before she joins the business." "She makes excellent pancakes," I offered, trying to lighten the mood. "Pancakes," Alan scoffed. "She needs to learn to barbecue." "Walker, my boy, what is the first step in making a good rib?" That child, who was only 6, started saying crap I'd never paid attention to when using my grill. It had to be 15 minutes of his explanation of a succulent rib. I vowed never to eat another one from their chain in my life. "We'll need to arrange regular visits," Rebecca declared. "Perhaps summer programs at the corporate headquarters. The children should know their heritage and legacy." I felt my spine stiffen. Any visits would need to work around their school schedules, and they have activities they're committed to almost daily. Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Family should be the priority, Dr. Jimenez. If their schedules are too full for family, perhaps their guardianship arrangements need reconsideration." The threat hung in the air like a thundercloud. "Stop it, Rebecca," Crystal hissed. "Yes, Mother, that is quite enough," Anthony agreed. "Mom, can we go on Space Mountain now?" Carter asked, oblivious to the tension. "In a bit, honey," I answered, my gaze locked with Rebecca's. Anthony, sensing the standoff escalating, moved closer. "Mother, we agreed this was just a friendly meeting. No business, no custody discussions. There has never been a reason to question Mari's care of the children, so drop it." Rebecca waved a hand dismissively. "I'm simply suggesting that Rebecca would benefit from more family influence." "It's Becca," my annoyed girl insisted again, louder this time. Rebecca clutched her pearls with a tight smile. "Well." As the conversation devolved, I noticed a tall man approaching our group. My tension eased slightly. "Joseph," I called, relief evident in my voice. Joseph Pope, with his easygoing smile and steady presence, joined us. "Sorry I'm late." The line was insane at the gate. Anthony's expression darkened as he noted the way Joseph's hand found mine, the engagement ring catching the sunlight. I decided to irk him more by kissing my fiancé, who smiled at me wickedly. "So this is the handyman," Anthony remarked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Joseph's smile didn't falter. "Hardware store owner, actually. 12 locations across 3 states now and growing. But I can fix a leaky faucet if needed." Rebecca's attention shifted, her calculating gaze now assessing Joseph. "Pope Hardware? The chain that partners with that home renovation show?" Joseph nodded, unfazed by her scrutiny. "That's us. Good exposure for the business." Anthony scoffed. "Playing with tools while real men serve their country." "Dad." Becca protested. "That's rude. Joseph's nice and teaches me things with tools. And he always calls me by my correct name." I watched as Rebecca and her brothers exchanged glances. The revelation that Becca was interested in hardware rather than barbecue sauce clearly displeased them. "Perhaps we should all enjoy the park," Joseph suggested diplomatically. "It's a big day for the kids to meet everyone." As we moved toward Tomorrowland, Anthony fell into step beside me. "You've changed," he said quietly. "More confident. Less driven." "I'm still driven," I corrected him. "Just balanced now. Like the heart," he quoted my words from years ago. "Strength, rhythm, and love." I nodded, surprised he remembered. "Exactly. I messed up," Anthony continued. "With us. With the kids. Crystal and I, it's complicated. I see you with the hardware guy." "Joseph," I interrupted. "Joseph," Anthony amended. "You seem happy. It makes me wonder if we could try again. For the kids. For us." I stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Anthony, you married Crystal when I was 5 months pregnant with Becca and kept that marriage secret along with the boys until Becca spotted you in that store. Since that moment there's been no us to try again." His face hardened. "So that's it? The handyman wins." "This isn't a competition," I replied. "It's my life and our children's lives. Joseph loves them, respects me, and shows up consistently. That's not winning, that's being a partner. Damn, I've never found you more attractive. Maybe you can slip off that ring for a couple of hours and disappear with me." I think it would be better if we both kept our rings on and figure out how to make that suggestion disappear. Go walk with your wife, Captain Reardon. And from now on, restrict your conversations with me to the kids. Ahead of us, Rebecca was deep in conversation with Becca, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Your grandmother thinks you could be the first female CEO of Braswell Hospitality, I overheard as I approached. We could petition for summer custody, get you started with the basics of the business here in Florida. Of course, the first thing we must teach is how to respect your elders. I don't like the way you correct me, and that will not fly with others. What must your mother be teaching you? Mom, Becca called, her voice uncertain. I stepped forward, placing a protective hand on my daughter's shoulder. Becca will be spending the summer with her immediate family, her brothers, Joseph and me. If she develops an interest in the restaurant business, we can discuss appropriate visits, but that will not happen before she's 18. There will be no custody arrangements beyond what the court has already established. Rebecca's expression hardened. You can't keep these children from their legacy, their birthright. Watch me, I replied calmly. I've faced board certifications and surgeries that lasted for hours. A custody threat doesn't scare me, especially one with no basis. The great-grandfather, who had been quietly observing, suddenly laughed, a rusty sound like rarely used machinery. She's got spine, this one. Reminds me of my Eliza. He turned his roomy gaze to Becca. Girl, you do what makes you happy. The barbecue business has enough stuffed shirts already. Your mother's right about that. Rebecca looked shocked. Boss. Oh, hush, Rebecca, the old man said. I came here to meet my great-grandchildren, not scout for executives. Now who's going to take an old man on that space roller coaster? I will, Luke volunteered eagerly. As we moved through the park in an uneasy truce, I felt Joseph's reassuring presence beside me. Anthony walked ahead with Crystal and their boys, occasionally glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. You okay? Joseph asked quietly. I watched as Becca, now relaxed, chatted with her great-grandfather about her science project rather than future business prospects. Carter and Luke raced ahead with their half-brothers, momentarily forgetting they were strangers. I think so, I replied. It's messy and complicated and not at all how I planned this day. But then again, life rarely follows the treatment protocol, Joseph finished, using one of my favorite medical phrases. I smiled, remembering the young medical student I'd once been, and the journey that had led me here, to a life full of unexpected complications and profound joys. No, I agreed, squeezing his hand. But sometimes the unplanned treatments work out better than we could have imagined. Let's hope the rest of the week is better than today. As the sun began to set over Magic Kingdom, casting the iconic castle in shades of purple and gold, our unlikely family procession made its way toward Main Street. The children's excited chatter filled the spaces where adult tension had previously lingered. Boss, as he insisted everyone call him, had taken a surprising shine to Becca. Not for her business potential, but for what he called her moxie. They'd spent the afternoon discussing everything from her interest in engineering to his stories of building the first Braswell restaurant from scratch with his late wife. You know, he told her as we paused to watch a parade, your great-grandmother Eliza designed our first store layout. She was an architect by training, not a cook at all. Becca's eyes widened. Really? Nobody mentioned that. Some family stories get buried under others, he replied, shooting a pointed look at Rebecca. The sauce might be famous, but it was Eliza's building designs that made our restaurant stand out from the beginning. Marisol, Rebecca approached me as we waited for the fireworks to begin. Her tone had softened somewhat. I may have been overzealous earlier. You threatened custody of my children, I replied evenly. A poor choice, she admitted. Anthony speaks highly of your parenting despite your differences. And it's clear the children are healthy and well-adjusted. I studied her face, trying to determine if this was strategy or sincerity. What are you really looking for, Rebecca? Her composure wavered slightly. Connection. The Braswell name means something, and these children, all of them, are its future. Though they are technically Reardons, I don't want to lose that for those in my direct line. Then build bridges instead of barricades, Joseph suggested, joining our conversation. Kids need grandparents who love them for who they are, not what legacy they might fulfill. Rebecca's gaze shifted to where Boss sat with Becca, pointing out constellations appearing in the darkening sky. My father's never taken to any of the grandchildren. Because she's herself, I said. Not because she fits some Braswell mold. Rebecca did not like that comment, but before she could respond, the first explosion of fireworks drew everyone's attention skyward. I felt Carter slide under one arm while Becca pressed against my other side. Joseph stood behind us, a steadying presence as always. Anthony approached, his youngest son from his marriage perched on his shoulders. "Room for one more?" he asked, nodding to the space beside Becca. My daughter shifted slightly, making room for her father. In the kaleidoscope of colored light, I could see a spectrum of emotions on Anthony's face. Regret, pride, uncertainty. "They're growing up fast," he murmured. "They are," I agreed. "I've missed too much." I didn't contradict him. The truth didn't require my emphasis. "Be aware of my mother," Anthony advised. "She's controlling, so be aware." I nodded, already on guard. "And I apologize for earlier. It will not happen again." I nodded with a smile. "Good." Joseph joined us and wrapped an arm around me. Anthony studied the man who had stepped into the father role he had vacated. There was less hostility now, perhaps even a reluctant respect. "Take care of them," Anthony said finally. "Any protection you provide will be far better than any attempt I made." "That will never cause for worry as long as I breathe," Joseph replied. As the fireworks reached their crescendo, Boss announced he was treating everyone to ice cream. The children cheered, momentarily united by the universal appeal of dessert. "Marisol," Boss beckoned as the group moved toward the ice cream parlor. "Walk with me a minute." I fell into step beside the Braswell patriarch, surprised by the vigor in his movements despite his advanced age. "You remind me of my Eliza," he said without preamble. "So does Becca. My wife wanted to be a doctor too, but she gave it up to help me with the business and became an architect instead." This was news to me. I didn't realize. Rebecca doesn't mention it. Doesn't fit the Braswell narrative she prefers. He chuckled dryly. "Eliza always regretted leaving medicine. Said helping people heal fulfilled her in ways business success never could." We walked in silence for a moment. "I'm glad you didn't give up your calling," he continued. "And that girl of yours, Becca, she's got her great-grandmother's spark. Don't let Rebecca push her into the family business unless she wants it." "I won't," I promised. "Good." He nodded firmly. "Hopefully one of the children will want to join the company, but it does not have to be Becca. Now before the ice cream melts, there's one more thing. Eliza set up trusts for all the great-grandchildren. Education only, no strings attached. It's in her will, though Rebecca's been selective about mentioning it. Your 3 are included because they are in her direct line." I stopped walking. "Mr. Braswell." "Boss," he corrected. "Or Jacob if you prefer." "Jacob," I amended. "That's very generous, but it's not my money, it's Eliza's. And it's not for you to refuse on their behalf." His eyes, sharp despite his years, held mine. "Let them choose their own paths with one less barrier in their way. They are entitled to that money like the others, including all my other great-grandchildren." I nodded, deciding to let my 3 choose. As we rejoined the others, I watched my children. Becca deep in conversation with her great-grandfather about building design, Carter showing his half-brothers his prize trading cards, Luke with ice cream already smeared across his face, and felt a sense of peace settling over the chaos. Joseph handed me a chocolate cone. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I replied. "It's messy and complicated and nothing like I expected." Joseph and I sat on the ground with the others. "What happened earlier?" he whispered after moving close and holding my waist. "My ex was being a man and an ass." I quickly nipped it, hence the apology. Joseph frowned at Anthony, then turned to me. "Good, but if it ever happens again, let me know. Unlike him, I don't share." "Neither do I on purpose," I said and kissed my fiancé under the glow of fireworks. Later that night, as we tucked exhausted children into hotel beds, Joseph and I stepped onto the balcony. A castle still glowed in the distance, a fantasy amid reality. "What a day," he sighed, pulling me close. "The first of many," I replied. "I don't think we've seen the last of the Braswells." "Probably not," he agreed. "But we handled it. Together." Together. The word resonated. So different from the isolation I'd felt during medical school, during my residency, during those early years of single parenthood. "You know," I said, watching the distant fireworks that marked the park's closing. "I've spent my career delivering new hearts. I never expected someone would help repair mine." Joseph's smile was visible even in the dim light. "That's the thing about restoration, Dr. Jiménez. Sometimes you don't realize something's broken until you feel how it works when it's whole again." I smiled. "Thank you for putting me back together." On a comfortable afternoon in September, we married in his parents' large backyard with 55 people in attendance. Everyone participated in the menu, so there was a plethora of foods to choose from. My first plate had chicken fried rice, a steak taco, fried wings, and macaroni salad. On my next trip to the food table, I vowed to get myself some fried fish, spaghetti, deviled eggs, and garlic bread. Don't get me started on our cake. That three-tiered beauty filled with chocolate made me want to weep. I got pregnant 6 months into the marriage and took off 10 months to take care of myself, hoping for an easy, safe pregnancy. Sophia Lizette arrived 3 days after Joe's birthday, and all I could do was cry with happiness. 18 months later, I was surprised to find myself pregnant again, and after Joseph Armando's birth, I had my tubes taken care of, so there were no more oops. 6 years after our wedding, with a 12-hour shift on the OB floor behind me, all I wanted was a hot shower and perhaps a few moments of quiet before the inevitable chaos that came with a household of 5 children. On the drive to the home I bought with Joseph a year after our marriage, the spring air carried the scent of fresh blossoms as I recalled the afternoon an unexpected call changed our lives for the better. It started when Becca's MIT acceptance letter arrived before Christmas. I was in the middle of a busy clinic day when my phone buzzed with her excited text. My brilliant daughter was accepted to one of the most prestigious engineering programs in the country. Pride swelled in my chest as I quickly stepped out to call and congratulate her. "Mom, can you believe it? All those late nights studying actually paid off." Her voice bubbled with the kind of pure joy that made my heart swell. Becca had been laser-focused on MIT since she was 14. Her room was adorned with the university's pennants and posters of famous female engineers and scientists. Her science fair projects had grown increasingly sophisticated each year, culminating in the development of a sustainable food preservation system that garnered national recognition. "I never doubted you for a second, honey," I told her, blinking back tears. When we ended the call, I rushed to the nurse's station and excitedly shouted, "MIT." I was truly happy with Becca's choice and cheered and clapped with my coworkers, but I'd always miss the face of my face. I pulled into the driveway, noting Joseph's car was already there, which meant dinner would be handled. One of the many blessings of marrying a man who believed in true partnership. As I entered our home, the sound of heated voices drifted from the kitchen. I recognized the controlled tension in one voice immediately: Becca. At 18, my firstborn had grown into a beautiful young woman of remarkable poise, except when dealing with her paternal grandmother. "It's MIT, Grandma Bex. Do you understand what that means? I'd be studying with the top engineering faculty in the country." I paused in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt but unwilling to walk away. "Engineering is a worthy field, Becca, but a degree from Duke would connect you with our business and its partners. You could complete your education and step directly into management at Braswell Hospitality. You'd look good sitting at the CEO's desk and ruling all those men with an iron fist. Doesn't that sound better than trying to build things that aren't needed?" I suppressed a sigh. Since Jacob Boss Braswell passed away 2 years ago, Rebecca had redoubled her efforts to pull Becca into the family business. The education trusts he and his late wife established had been honored, but came with increasingly persistent ideals from Rebecca. Joseph appeared in the hallway, our youngest balanced on his hip as he kissed and hugged me. "She's been here for an hour," he whispered, nodding toward the kitchen. "I've been trying to give Becca space to handle it herself." "Smart man," I murmured, taking Manny, who immediately grabbed my stethoscope. "Where are the other kids?" "Sophia is next door with Chloe until dinner." There was some kind of important meeting concerning Barbie's latest divorce from Ken, which coincides with Lily and James' latest marriage woes. Luke and Carter are at soccer practice with Anthony, who arrived with his mother, and she started her spiel as soon as Becca got home from her shift at Pope's. "They should be back before dinner." "Saturdays," I sighed. "Guess a relaxing bath will have to wait." Co-parenting with Anthony had improved over the years, particularly after Joseph and I married. Anthony's marriage to Crystal had ended, and he'd remained in Tampa near the Braswell headquarters. Anthony was now the family company's CEO, and he video chatted with our children every night and visited monthly, usually coinciding with something important with our children. Crystal allowed him to bring their kids along on some of those visits. I nodded my thanks and steeled myself before entering the kitchen. Becca sat at the island, college acceptance letters spread before her. At 18 she had her father's height and her maternal grandmother's warm brown skin, but her focused determination was all her own. Rebecca Braswell Reardon, now in her late 60s but looking a decade younger thanks to impeccable tailoring, cosmetics and surgical assistance, stood on the opposite side. Her expression softened slightly when she saw me. Marisol, perhaps you can talk some sense into Becca. MIT is an excellent school of course, but the Braswell path is not the only path, I finished gently, setting Manny down. Hello Rebecca. I see we're discussing Becca's future again. Becca shot me a grateful look. Mom, MIT offered a full ride. Their engineering program is exactly what I want. Massachusetts is very far from Florida, Rebecca pointed out. Duke would keep you closer to family headquarters. Not by much, Joseph said. He had followed me in and was quietly preparing tea, his presence a calming influence. You know, he said conversationally, when I was deciding on colleges, my father was convinced I should follow him into law. For years he had my whole life planned out at his firm. And instead you became a successful businessman, Becca said, smiling at her stepfather. With a chain of stores. I did. And while it disappointed him initially, he eventually saw that I was happier and more successful following my own interests. Rebecca's posture remained rigid. The Braswell legacy will continue, I interjected firmly. But forcing Becca into a predetermined path isn't what Jacob wanted. Remember what he told us about Eliza. A flash of something, regret perhaps, crossed Rebecca's face. Boss was becoming sentimental in his old age. Or maybe he was finally being honest, Becca said quietly. BD told me more about great-grandma Eliza before he died. She designed the original Braswell restaurants, but she was supposed to be a doctor. She gave up medicine for the family business and regretted it her whole life. The kitchen fell silent except for Manny's babbling as he played with measuring cups on the floor. He shouldn't have shared that, Rebecca finally said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Why not? Becca challenged. Because it doesn't fit the perfect Braswell narrative? Grandma, I love our family history. I'm proud of it. But I need to create my own story. I moved to the refrigerator for an apple, giving Becca space to advocate for herself while remaining present for support. The family business needs fresh perspectives, Rebecca insisted. And it will get them, Becca replied. But first I need to develop my own perspective. I want to study architectural engineering. Maybe someday I'll design the next generation of Braswell restaurants. But it will be because I'm qualified and passionate about it, not because I'm obligated. Besides, if I don't join, there are other Braswells who can take the helm. The rear door burst open and the tranquil moment was shattered by the arrival of Luke and Carter, now 14 and 12 respectively, accompanied by Anthony. Luke bounded into the kitchen still in his soccer uniform and shouted, Becca, did you decide yet? Dibs on your room. Dad says you got into everywhere, Carter added, making a beeline for the refrigerator to grab a bottle of juice. Where are you going for college? Anthony paused in the doorway and nodded my way. Congratulations on the acceptances, Becca, he said, pride evident in his voice. Have you made a decision? All eyes turned to Becca, who straightened her shoulders in a gesture I recognized from my own moments of resolution. I'm going to MIT, she announced. I want to study architectural engineering with a minor in sustainable design. Boston's cold, Anthony remarked good-naturedly. So is Ohio, Becca giggled. But I'll buy more sweaters. Rebecca set her teacup down with precision. I see my input has been considered and dismissed. Joseph, ever the diplomat, spoke up. Not dismissed, Rebecca. Becca has a different vision for her contribution to the family legacy. One that honors the past while looking to the future. I caught his eye with a grateful glance. After 6 years of marriage, he still found ways to bridge divides I might have confronted head-on. The trusts from Jacob and Eliza will cover the tuition and living expenses, I added, moving Becca's purple hair from her face. He believed in education without conditions. But if you're concerned about accepting, stop. I'll pay. We'll pay, Joseph corrected. I smiled at my husband and finished. We'll pay tuition to wherever you want to go. And I will contribute too, Anthony promised. But don't discount the funds that have already been set aside for you. That money will always be there for you. Rebecca's expression remained impassive, but I'd learned to recognize the slight softening around her eyes that indicated reluctant acceptance. Your great-grandfather would expect excellence regardless of your path, she finally said to Becca. I know, Becca replied. And I intend to deliver it. As dinner preparations transformed into a family affair, Anthony plating the rib dinner he supplied from one of his local restaurants, Joseph supervising Carter and Luke setting the table, Sophia helping by reorganizing the napkins multiple times, I found myself sitting beside Becca at the kitchen island. Are you sure about MIT? I asked quietly after Sophia climbed on Becca's lap. It's your decision, but I want you to be certain. I meant what I said about your tuition. She nodded, confidence evident in her posture as she tickled her sister's cheek. I've been designing buildings since I was 10, Mom. This feels right. Besides, she added with a small smile, BD left me his original sketches of the first Braswell restaurant. He told me to reimagine it someday, not just replicate it. He was wiser than most gave him credit for, I observed. Like someone else I know, Becca replied, bumping her shoulder against mine. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast. It was a Saturday in April, the kind of day that promised warmth and possibility. My oldest daughter, Becca, now 18 and in her final semester of high school, sat at the island counter, surrounded by envelopes and letters, her college acceptance package from MIT prominently displayed. Mom, they're offering me a full ride, she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. Tuition, room and board, even a stipend for books and research materials, all covered. What? I wiped my hands on a dish towel and moved to embrace her. Oh honey, I'm so proud of you. This is everything you've worked for. Joseph entered the kitchen with Manny perched on his shoulders. What's all the excitement about? He asked, though the knowing smile on his face told me he'd already heard the news from the doorway. MIT. Full scholarship, I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. That's my girl. Joseph lowered Manny to the floor and gave Becca a high five that turned into a hug. Though not her biological father, Joseph had been a second dad to Becca, and their bond was a beautiful thing to witness. Carter and Luke tumbled into the kitchen next, followed by 4-year-old Sophie, Joseph's and my first child together. The kitchen filled with the chaotic energy of our blended family, 3 children from my relationship with Anthony and 2 with Joseph. When are you telling Dad? Carter asked Becca between mouthfuls of cereal. Becca's smile widened. I texted him last night. He said congratulations. A text. Of course. Since Christmas, Anthony's parenting often came in the form of sporadic messages and occasional appearances when it suited him or his position as CEO. The video chats became weekly, then decreased to when he found time. I had a suspicion Rebecca was behind the new routine, but I couldn't prove it. He claimed it would end soon because Luke told him that he didn't like his new way of parenting. I agreed. Speaking of his family, what about Grandma Rebecca? Luke asked innocently. Becca's expression darkened. I haven't told her yet. Joseph and I exchanged glances. Rebecca Braswell had been increasingly involved in the children's lives over the past few years. On her terms, of course. After our confrontation at Disney World 6 years ago, boundaries had been established, but Rebecca had a way of pushing against them constantly, especially with Becca. Becca's cell went off. She checked the caller ID and grimaced. Speak of the devil. It's as if that woman had some sort of sixth sense for family discussions about her, she muttered, then composed herself before answering. Hi, Grandma Bex. Yes, some more came letters yesterday. Yes, there was one from them, but... I watched as Becca's face went from cautious to confused to crestfallen in the span of seconds. But I only want to attend MIT. No, I understand UF has a good business program, but that's not what Grandma, I've been planning on MIT since. Joseph quietly ushered the younger children out of the kitchen, sensing the brewing storm. I moved closer to Becca, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. The family business needs someone with vision, Grandma, but that doesn't mean I have to. No, I appreciate your opinion, but... Becca's voice trailed off as she listened, her knuckles white around the phone. Finally, she handed it to me. She wants to talk to you, Mom. I took the phone, giving Becca's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Rebecca, good morning. Marisol. Rebecca's voice was cool and controlled as always. I hope you're not encouraging this MIT nonsense still. Becca has a place waiting for her at the University of Florida, thanks to me. The business school there is excellent, and the hospitality program will give her exactly what she needs to eventually run Braswell Hospitality. Rebecca, I said carefully, Becca has worked incredibly hard for this opportunity. Engineering is her passion. Passions don't build legacies, Rebecca interrupted. The Braswell name means something in hospitality, especially in the Southeast. We're the first family of barbecue, and Becca is positioned to be our first female CEO. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. It's your opportunity, not hers, I countered. Becca has her own dreams, and you knew her choice months ago, and now she has a scholarship that proves that she made the right choices in her career and school. Dreams don't pay bills, Marisol. MIT may offer a scholarship now, but what about after? The connections she'll make at UF, the network we can provide her. That's real security. Not to mention that she'll be closer to our headquarters at UF than she will be at MIT, and what she has been living in Ohio. You need to take charge and make her see that U of F is the better way to go. I glanced at Becca, who was watching me with worried eyes. Rebecca, I appreciate your concern, but this decision belongs to Becca. She's earned the right to choose her own path, and that path has led her to MIT, and that's the end of it. I see. Rebecca's voice turned even cooler. Well then, I will speak with Becca again. Privately. I handed the phone back to Becca with trepidation. After a few minutes of listening, Becca's face paled. She ended the call with a quiet, "I'll think about it," and set the phone down as if it might bite her. What did she say? I asked gently. Becca looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She said if I don't go to UF, she'll cut me off completely. No help with grad school, no trust fund, no place in the family business, and nothing left to me in her will. She said. Becca's voice broke. She said I'd be choosing to walk away from the family, and that she could never forgive. Disowning you, Joseph sighed. My daughter nodded, tears finally falling. My blood boiled. This was classic Rebecca Braswell-Reardon manipulation, using money and family loyalty as weapons. Becca, you don't need her money or those Braswell trusts if she blocks them. You have the MIT scholarship, and your father and I have already told you that we'll help with anything else you need. As will I, Joseph promised. Becca nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. Despite Rebecca's controlling nature, she had been a presence in Becca's life, especially in recent months when Anthony had been even more absent. The Braswell connection was part of Becca's identity, whether I liked it or not. There's more, Becca said quietly. She mentioned Parker Donovan. I frowned. Who? Becca dropped her head and sighed hard. The grandson of James Donovan, boss's business partner. Apparently he's studying business at UF too. Grandma said something about uniting the families and how perfect it would be if Parker and I. She's trying to arrange a marriage, I screeched. 18. This isn't the 19th century. She is, Becca clarified. She said if I won't consider the business angle, I should at least consider the familial advantages of such a match. Joseph, frozen where he stood at the stove, shouted, outlandish. Is the woman also demanding a time frame for a pregnancy after the marriage too? I rubbed my fingers on my temples, where a headache was forming in frustration. Picking up my cell, I said, this is outrageous. I'm calling Anthony. But Anthony's phone went to voicemail as it often did. I left a terse message and demanded that he call me back immediately about his mother's interference in Becca's college decision and life. Over the next week, Rebecca launched a full campaign. Flowers and UF merchandise arrived daily. A professionally bound presentation about the benefits of the UF business program appeared on our doorstep. The final straw came when Rebecca herself showed up unannounced on a Wednesday afternoon, with Parker Donovan in tow. I was just returning from my shift at the hospital, and saw a luxury SUV in our driveway, but initially I foolishly thought Joseph had upgraded his vehicle. Inside our living room sat Rebecca, elegant as always in a designer suit, alongside a clean-cut young man who looked thoroughly uncomfortable. Both made me feel completely underdressed in my magenta scrubs. Marisol, there you are, Rebecca said pleasantly, as if this ambush was completely normal. I thought it was time for Becca to meet Parker. They have so much in common. Becca sat on the sofa opposite them, her posture rigid and her expression carefully neutral. Joseph stood by the fireplace, his protective stance telling me he'd been monitoring the situation closely. "Rebecca," I said, struggling to maintain my composure, "this is inappropriate. You can't just show up with a prospective suitor for my 18-year-old daughter." "Don't be theatrical, Marisol," Rebecca said with a dismissive wave. "I'm simply introducing two young people who might enjoy each other's company at college next fall." "I've already decided to go to MIT, Becca said firmly. Rebecca's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Darling, you haven't submitted your final decision yet. There's still time to make the right choice." "MIT is the right choice for me, Mrs. Reardon." Rebecca's eyes turned to fire as she glared at Becca, who glared back at her. Parker cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reardon, I think maybe I should go. Becca clearly has her heart set on MIN." "Nonsense," Rebecca cut him off. "Becca's just being stubborn. It runs in the family, I'm afraid." I'd had enough. "Rebecca, the only thing I agree with is that stubbornness does run in her family, and you are the prime example. Kindly think about your beliefs and your actions today before you lose Becca from your life. Now I think it's time for you and Parker to leave. Becca has made her decision and we support her in every way." Rebecca stood, smoothing her skirt. "Very well. But this conversation isn't over. Becca dear, think about what you're giving up. Not just money but your heritage." He turned to me. "I'll be calling Anthony about this. Perhaps he can talk some sense into all of you." After they left, Becca collapsed onto the sofa. "I can't believe she did that." "I can," I said grimly. "That is classic Rebecca. When she wants something, she pulls out all the stops." Later that evening my phone rang. Anthony was finally returning my call. "Mari, what's going on?" "Mom's on the warpath about Becca and MIT." I explained everything. The scholarship, Rebecca's ultimatum, even the surprise visit with Parker Donovan. Anthony was silent for a long moment. "She did the same thing to me, you know," he finally said. "When I wanted to study technology instead of business. She threatened to cut me off, saying I was betraying the family legacy. She only caved when I decided to forego college for the army, and that's because BD reined her in." "So you got away for a while," I said. "I did," he admitted quietly. "And I don't regret it. Outside of the training, I met you and we made Becca, Carter, and Lucas. I do regret the way I played you in Crystal, and I did because Mother chose Crystal and I wanted to choose. I wanted you." His candor surprised me. In all our years of co-parenting, Anthony had never acknowledged the consequences of his choices so directly. "Becca deserves better," he continued. "She's brilliant, Mari. MIT is exactly where she should be." "Say that to your mother," I said. "Becca needs your support, Anthony. Really needs it, not just in theory. She's too young to be thinking about marriage." "She definitely is. I'll talk to Mother now," he promised. "And not just on the phone. I'll be in Ohio this weekend. Mother has decided to sit Becca out at a hotel there. We'll sort this out when I arrive." I wasn't convinced. Anthony had made similar promises before, only to back down when confronted by his mother's iron will. But for Becca's sake, I hoped this time would be different. True to his word, Anthony arrived the following Saturday morning. We gathered in the living room, Anthony, Joseph, Becca, and me, to discuss the situation. "Mom has always been controlling," Anthony explained to Becca. "She believes she knows what's best for everyone in the family." "But it's my life," Becca protested. "I don't want to run a barbecue chain no matter how successful it is. I want to design sustainable energy systems. I may even design new buildings for the restaurants, but I don't think I'll ever want to run the company." Anthony nodded. "You should pursue your dreams. I'll talk to Mom, make her understand. Maybe dangle a carrot that you may change your mind later like I did, but you don't have to. Your life, your choice." Before he could say more, the doorbell rang. Joseph answered it to find Rebecca standing there looking triumphant. "Parker Donovan," Rebecca informed, "flew back to Florida last Sunday." "Perfect, you're all here," she said, sweeping into the room. "Anthony, darling, I'm glad you could join us for this important family discussion." Anthony stood up, his expression resolute. "Mom, we need to talk about this MIT situation. Becca has made her decision and I support her choice." Rebecca's smile remained fixed, but her eyes flashed with anger. "Anthony, darling, you don't understand what's at stake here. The Braswell legacy. I understand perfectly, Anthony interrupted, surprising me with his firmness. This is about control, not legacy. I glanced between mother and son, feeling the tension crackle in the air. This confrontation had been brewing for decades. Becca will go to MIT, Anthony continued. She'll pursue what feels right to her, where her talents and passions lie. And she will always be a Braswell, regardless of where she goes to school or what career she chooses. Rebecca's facade cracked slightly. You're making a mistake. Both of you. He turned to me. Marisol, you have to rein in your daughter. Surely you understand the practical considerations. MIT is prestigious, yes, but the connections at UF, the guaranteed future. The future isn't guaranteed, Rebecca, I said calmly. And forcing Becca into a life she doesn't want isn't security. It's a prison. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Such nonsense. This is why I've always told Anthony that you shouldn't make decisions for this family, including Becca. The barb might have stung years ago, but not anymore. This isn't about my decision, which I have not made. I'm going by my adult daughter's wants, and Becca has a right to choose her own path. Rebecca turned back to Anthony. I expected this from someone as uncivilized as Marisol, but not from you. That's more than enough, Mother, Anthony said firmly. You can't buy Becca's future or threaten your way into getting what you want. Not this time. You've done nothing for either of them because I hid my real family for 12 years to avoid bullshit like this from you. Everything would have been so much better if Becca hadn't spotted me in that damn store. For a moment, Rebecca looked genuinely stunned at her son's outburst. In all his years, Anthony had never directly challenged her like this, and I only learned that a few months ago, when he missed Luke's last soccer game of the season for an important meeting with the Braswell board at his mother's insistence. If you cut Becca off financially, Anthony continued, I'll match whatever support you would have provided. And if you're serious about disinheriting her over her college choice, then I'll need to reconsider my own position in the family business. The threat wasn't subtle. As CEO since his grandfather's death, Anthony was the public face of the company. His departure would be devastating. Rebecca's composure slipped completely. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Anthony replied, his voice steady. I watched this exchange with a mixture of shock and admiration. This was a side of Anthony I'd rarely seen, the man I'd glimpsed when we first fell in love, before I became pregnant with Becca. Rebecca stood silently for a moment, clearly recalculating. Then her expression smoothed over and she smiled tightly. Well, perhaps I've been overzealous in my approach. Of course, Becca should follow her dreams. She turned to our daughter. Darling, I apologize if I've seemed unsupportive. I only want what's best for you. The sudden pivot was jarring but not surprising. Rebecca was nothing if not strategic. When direct pressure failed, she'd always fall back to more subtle tactics. Thank you, Grandma, Becca said cautiously. I'm glad you understand that I wouldn't have been happy at the University of Florida. Sure, darling. MIT is a wonderful school, Rebecca continued, her voice honeyed. And I'm sure you'll excel there. Perhaps we can discuss some potential internships at Braswell during your summer breaks? Just to keep your options open, I mean. I exchanged glances with Joseph, who raised an eyebrow. Rebecca wasn't giving up, she was just changing strategies. I believed she had something up her sleeve. We can talk about summer plans later, I interjected firmly. Right now, Becca needs to focus on finishing her senior year strong. Of course, Rebecca said, waving a hand dismissively. Well, I should be going. So much to do. She kissed Becca's cheek, nodded coolly to me and Joseph, and paused by Anthony and gave her son a sour smile. Walk me out, dear? Anthony looked at me and said, I'll be right back, Marisol. As they stepped outside, my husband moved to stand beside me. This is insane, Joseph murmured. Your ex has quite a mother. I don't believe she's done. Not by a long shot, I agreed. But this was still a victory. When Anthony returned, his expression was grim but determined. She's furious, he reported. Threatened all sorts of things, but I held firm. Becca threw her arms around her father. Thank you, Dad. I should have done this years ago, Anthony said, hugging her. I'm sorry it took me so long to stand up to her. As I watched them, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Pride in Becca's strength. Relief at Anthony's support. And a weary certainty that Rebecca wasn't finished trying to control our daughter's future. Becca's high school graduation made me an emotional mess, and the party in our new backyard was lively until it ended at 2 in the morning. My daughter kept working at Pope's Hardware and Supply until August, then she got serious about her move to Boston. We shopped, packed, and I was thrilled that she spent almost every night at home with her family. 2 weeks before the family was taking a road trip to help her move into her apartment, I got a call from MIT, and I did not like one word the woman said. My hand tightened around the phone. The cheerful voice on the other end of the line, a woman from the MIT financial aid office, was explaining something incomprehensible. I figured I had misheard her and asked her to repeat everything. I'm Harriet Wellman, MIT financial aid. I'm just calling to say that the transfer of Becca A. Riordan's generous gift of her full scholarship has been placed with another student of her caliber, and they will begin classes soon with gratitude. I'm sorry, I said, my voice thin. Did you just say that my daughter's scholarship was gifted to another student? Yes, the woman replied, her tone softening with a hint of confusion. A Mrs. Rebecca Braswell Riordan called our office a few weeks ago and notified us that she would be covering the full tuition, and Becca wanted her to gift the scholarship on her behalf to another student in need and gave us a sizable donation. She said it was a family decision. Is there some misunderstanding? A cold dread washed over me. A family decision. Rebecca's voice, honeyed and fake, echoed in my ears. Just to keep your options open. I knew she had something up her sleeve, but I never could have imagined this level of manipulation. She had been fighting to get Becca to Braswell Hospitality LLC on her own terms. By paying the full tuition, she wasn't just being generous, she was buying control. Yes, I said, my voice shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in a long time. There's a very big misunderstanding. My daughter still needs that scholarship. Please, can you reverse it? I'm afraid we can't, the woman said, sounding genuinely apologetic. The funds have already been reallocated. The scholarship is no longer available for this year. And her status as a student? Perhaps she can try in January or next fall, she sighed. I am sorry. Not as sorry as Rebecca will be. I ended the call, my mind reeling. I had to tell Joseph and Anthony, but the thought of delivering this news was agonizing. I found Joseph in the garage tinkering with our daughter's bike. I stood there for a moment, unable to speak, the words stuck in my throat. What is it, Marisol? He asked, sensing my distress. What's happened? It's Rebecca, I said, the words a bitter taste in my mouth. She called MIT and declined Becca's scholarship. She told them she's paying for everything. Joseph's face went white. The wrench in his hand fell to the floor with a loud clang, and he stood frozen, a mix of disbelief and rage swirling in his eyes. That can't be, he whispered, his voice a low growl. She wouldn't. She can't. She did, I said, the words in icy certainty. She didn't want Becca to go to MIT on her own. She wants to own her. She wants to be able to pull the strings for the rest of her life. He sank onto a stool, his head in his hands. I didn't think she'd go that far, he said, his voice full of self-reproach. We said she wasn't giving up, but I did not see this coming. We both should have, I admitted, my anger now a hollow ache of defeat. We had to tell Becca, but how? How do you tell your daughter that the future she's been working toward, the independence she so desperately craved, had just been bought out from under her? The moment we told her, the air went out of the room. Becca's face, once so full of excitement for her future, crumpled. The tears came silently at first, rolling down her cheeks as she sat on the couch, frozen in disbelief. Then the questions poured out, a frantic, desperate attempt to make sense of the betrayal. I don't understand why she would do this, Becca sobbed, the words muffled as she buried her face in her hands. I have a job. I have money saved, parents. I don't need a scholarship or her money. I had ways to pay for school without a scholarship. Honey, it's not about the money, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's about control. She wants to own you, to have something to hold over your head forever. But Becca wasn't listening. She was already on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She opened a new browser, went to the MIT website, and searched for a way to contact the financial aid office. She was a woman on a mission, a warrior trying to reclaim what was rightfully hers. She was my daughter, and she would not give up without a fight. As she frantically clicked through the website, I pulled out my phone. I wasn't going to let Rebecca get away with this. I found her number and with a trembling hand I hit the call button. She picked up on the second ring, her voice smooth and syrupy. Marisol, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I know how much that scholarship meant to Becca. Don't you dare, I snapped, my voice a low, furious growl. Don't you dare pretend you didn't do this. I know you declined her scholarship. I know you're trying to control her. A sigh of practiced patience escaped her lips. I don't know what you're talking about, Marisol. I would never do such a thing. I only want what's best for Becca. Besides, she continued, her voice turning smug, I've already enrolled her in a school that's much better suited for her. She's a perfect fit for the University of Florida, and I've already told you and her that they have an excellent business program. I think she'll be very happy there. The words caused me to feel ice in my veins. The rage I felt was so intense that it made me dizzy. She didn't just decline the scholarship. She had already taken the next step in her carefully calculated plan. She was not only taking away Becca's future, but she was replacing it with one of her own design. You're a monster, I said, the words a raw whisper. I'm a grandmother who wants the best for her granddaughter, she replied, her voice turning cold. And a grandmother who will not have her granddaughter going to a school where she will learn to construct buildings out of tinker toys and manure. She needs to learn the family business that she will run someday. She needs me and my guidance. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking with fury. I looked at Becca, who was now sobbing into her hands. I sank on the couch beside her and wrapped her in my arms. It's true, I said, my voice thick with tears. She did it. She enrolled you at the University of Florida. Becca's head shot up. No, she said, her voice a desperate plea. She can't do that. I'm 18 with 3 high-functioning parents. She has no right to interfere. I know, I said, but she did. I'm sure she tossed her money around to do it. Becca's face, still streaked with tears, hardened into a mask of pure resolve. No, she said again, but this time it wasn't a plea. It was a cold, quiet fury. She can't do that. I'm going to tell her that I'm not going to that school. I'm going to tell her that she has no right to do this to me. I'm going to tell her that she can't buy my future. Becca, wait, I said, a sense of dread washing over me. Don't do anything rash. Let's talk to your father first. But it was too late. Becca was already on her laptop. She opened a video chat window, found her father's contact, and hit the call button. When his face appeared on the screen, he looked tired, his eyes etched with fatigue. I knew he had yet to hear the news. Becca, what is it? He asked, his voice thick with concern. Are you okay? No, Dad, I'm not, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Grandma just called my mom. Dad, she reallocated my scholarship, canceled my enrollment at MIT, and told Mom that she's enrolled me at the University of Florida. Anthony's face went from pale to ashen. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were blazing with a cold fury. I cannot believe that woman, he said, his voice a low growl. I'm going to call her right now. No, Dad, I'm going to add her here, Becca said, her voice now a solid wall of determination. We are going to confront her together. We are going to tell her that she cannot control my life. Anthony looked at her, and a flicker of pride and fear passed through his eyes. He saw the woman she was becoming, strong and determined, and he knew he couldn't stop her. He nodded, a grim expression on his face. Okay, he said, his voice firm. We'll do this together. Add her, honey. Becca quickly added her grandmother to the video call. Rebecca's face, smooth and unruffled, appeared on the screen. She was sitting in her lavish study, a glass of wine in her hand. She smiled warmly, her eyes glinting with a hidden smugness. What a lovely surprise, she said, her voice a practiced purr. To what do I owe the pleasure of this little family reunion? Stop it, Grandma, Becca said, her voice a low, furious rumble. I know what you did. I know you declined my scholarship and enrolled me at the University of Florida. Rebecca's smile didn't waver. Well, darling, she said, her voice still a honeyed lie, I only want what's best for you. MIT is a wonderful school, but it's so far away. The University of Florida has an excellent business program, and it's so much closer. We can see each other more often, maybe weekly lunches and shopping excursions, all on me, of course. You can come to me with any problems, especially those about your classes. This isn't about me, is it? Becca said, her voice thick with tears. This is about you. You can't stand the idea of me being independent. You can't stand the idea of me having a life that you can't control. You're trying to buy me. The smile finally slipped from Rebecca's face, replaced by a cold, hard glare. Don't be ridiculous, she said, her voice a sharp, cutting edge. Like I told your mother, I'm a grandmother who only wants to help her eldest granddaughter. I am making sure that you have a good, solid future. No, you're not, Anthony interjected, his voice shaking with rage. You're a coward, mother. You're so afraid of being alone that you're trying to ruin your granddaughter's future so she will stay close to you. You're so controlling that you will do anything to get what you want, even if it hurts your own granddaughter. This is why you and Dad ended, because you couldn't control him. Rebecca's face went white with fury. She slammed her glass down on her desk, the sound echoing through the speaker. How dare you speak to me like that, Anthony, she spat, her voice a venomous hiss. I am your mother. You will not disrespect me like this. You lost the right to my respect a long time ago, Anthony said, his voice low. You hurt my daughter and I will never forgive you. She is an adult. She can make her own decisions. She is going to MIT and she's going to do it without you and Braswell money. You're a monster and I want nothing to do with you ever again. Rebecca's face, still a mask of fury, flickered back onto the screen. You listen to me, Becca, she said, her voice a hiss. You will be at the University of Florida in 10 days and you will date Parker Donovan. In the fall after your graduation you will marry him. This has all been arranged, so fall in line. A cold dread washed over me. I looked at Anthony, his face pale and drawn. He had always known that Rebecca was manipulative, but this was a whole new level of control. And if I don't? Becca asked, her shaky voice defiant. You will be disinherited, Rebecca said, her voice as cold as ice. I will freeze all your accounts and you will not get a single penny from me and you will lose your trust funds from my parents. I control them all. Do you understand? I am doing this for your own good. I am not going to let you ruin your life like your father, who has no money to throw away on an alternative plan, and neither does your mother. You need me and you will be nothing without me. The screen went black, leaving us in stunned silence. Becca was now sobbing into her hands. Joseph kissed her hair and held her tightly. She can't do that, Anthony said, his voice a low growl. I'll get a lawyer. I'll fight this mess. She can, I said, my voice thick with tears. And she did, without thinking of anyone but herself, despite what she said. I have more than enough to contribute to my daughter's education, Anthony insisted. She was wrong about that. We can contribute too, Joseph said. Name the school, Becca. I'll write the check and we'll find you a place to stay. It can't be too late, right? The next week was a blur of phone calls and frantic attempts to find a way to fight Rebecca's actions, but every lawyer we called told us the same thing, her word against ours. We could not prove that Becca didn't turn down MIT and the scholarship. There was no written record either way. Becca's future was being held hostage and there was nothing we could do about it. There was no openings at any other colleges, so for now Becca had to go to the U of F. We caravanned to Florida, and Anthony led us with Becca in the passenger seat. Joseph drove his car and both were packed with things Becca would need for the studio apartment we found near the campus. She refused to live in the apartment her grandmother found, and believed she would be fine in a small place, since it was only her living there. We planned to leave Joseph's car with her and fly home. Parker Donovan, the guy with the confident demeanor of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world, met us. We went for coffee, which lasted precisely 45 minutes. During which he outlined his 5-year plan, law school, then joining his father's firm, and casually mentioned how their grandmothers had been discussing synergies between our families since they were children, which I found funny as Rebecca didn't meet my daughter until she was 11. Rebecca speaks very highly of you, he said to Becca, stirring his latte. She mentioned you're interested in business and hospitality management. My daughter forced a smile. Actually, my passion is architectural engineering. His laugh was patronizing. Engineering? That seems rather technical for someone like you. Someone like me? You know, a Braswell. Your family makes food, not buildings. Anthony glared at him. I gripped his arm and I excused myself, citing tiredness from the drive. Becca stood with me and Parker promised to call her for dinner that weekend. I hid a giggle when my daughter made a gagging sound. The first month Becca spent at U of F passed in a blur of core classes, careful text exchanges with Rebecca, and twice-weekly strategy calls with me, Joseph, and reports to Anthony, whom she stayed with every weekend to avoid her grandmother. She also dodged Parker when possible with excuses of study groups and adjustment periods. Rebecca arrived unannounced at her apartment in October and took Becca to an exclusive restaurant where, coincidentally, the Donovans were dining. Becca recorded the entire scene and played it for me, exasperated. "Parker tells me you've been rather unavailable," Rebecca remarked as they were seated. "Classes are demanding," she replied neutrally. "Becca," Rebecca called, dropping her voice, "I hope you understand your position. The trust disbursements, your siblings' educational funds, even your father's standing with Braswell Enterprises, all depend on family harmony." The threat was unmistakable. This wasn't just about Becca's future anymore. Rebecca was prepared to leverage her power against the entire family. "I understand," Becca said carefully. "I'll make more time for social engagements." "She's escalating because she's worried," I said, my voice steady despite the new threat. Joseph found something. The lawyer who helped Rebecca take over the trust has a history of questionable practices. The trust document requires annual financial disclosures, and there hasn't been one in 4 years. "She's hiding something." Hope flickered in Becca's voice. "So we can challenge her?" "Maybe. But we need to be careful. If Rebecca realizes we're building a case, she might move assets or create more obstacles." We developed a new strategy. Becca would appear to be warming to Rebecca's plans, starting with spending time with Parker and expressing interest in the Braswell operation, while Joseph, Anthony, and I gathered evidence and built legal support. The weeks that followed were an exhausting exercise in deception for Becca, who joined Parker for dinners, attended networking events as Rebecca's granddaughter, and pretended to reconsider her career path while we moved heaven and earth to find a hole in Rebecca's maneuvers. Meanwhile, Becca maintained a perfect GPA in all her courses, including ones selected specifically for their transferability to MIT. The charade became harder as Parker grew more possessive, introducing Becca as his girlfriend at social functions despite her careful avoidance of any romantic signals. When he tried to kiss her after a donor gala in November, she said she firmly stepped back. "I think you've misunderstood our relationship," she told him. His voice hardened. "Our grandmothers have an understanding about our future." "Their understanding isn't my commitment," Becca replied. The next day Rebecca called me and said, "Parker says your daughter is being difficult." "I don't think she is," I countered. "She never agreed to a relationship." "Becca," her voice was ice, "seems to be forgetting our arrangement. Perhaps I should speak with the dean about her academic standing." Fear swept through me. "That won't be necessary." "Oh, I'll tell her to try to be more receptive." That night Becca broke down on the phone with me. "I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "She's pushing me toward Parker and now she's threatening my academic record. She's controlling everything." "Enough," I decided. "Joseph's contact at the state attorney's office says we have enough to file a formal complaint about the trust manipulation." "What about the consequences? The trust, the company connections?" "Some things are worth more than money or connections," I said firmly. "Your freedom to choose your own path is one of them." 2 days later, Rebecca received formal notice of legal action challenging her control of the trust. That same afternoon, Becca was called to the financial aid office and informed that her tuition payment had been withdrawn. By evening, her access card had been deactivated. Rebecca called me, angered about the twisting events and Becca's refusal to answer her calls. Irritated that I no longer agreed to interfere, she said this is just the beginning, and that we've declared war on the Braswell legacy. I hung up on her. Anthony sounded grim when he called an hour later. "She's liquidating some of the trust assets. We've filed for an emergency injunction, but it might not be granted in time." He packed up Becca's belongings and stored them in Florida. Next he put Becca on a plane to Ohio. As we drove away from the airport after picking her up, she said she felt a strange mixture of relief and trepidation. The pretense was over, but the real battle was just beginning and Becca knew it. Rebecca's retaliation was swift and comprehensive. She canceled all Braswell-affiliated credit cards issued to Becca and the other members of their family, convened a meeting to remove Anthony as CEO, and publicly announced that Becca had been temporarily removed from succession planning due to mental health concerns. The legal process moved frustratingly slowly. December arrived with no resolution, and Becca's window for starting at MIT in January was closing rapidly. Then unexpectedly an ally emerged from within the Braswell empire. Crystal, Anthony's ex-wife, video called Becca. Crystal was dressed in designer clothes and perfect makeup. She looked like a wealthy, happy woman, and once again I felt plain in my scrubs, even though she was on a video chat. Rebecca overplayed her hand, she announced without preamble. The board is concerned about her recent behavior. Several members reached out to me after her campaign to unseat Anthony started. She's the only one who wants him removed. The man has greatly improved operations. After her divorce from Anthony, Crystal became a board member for the company. She had an interest in the company's continuing success, as she was given a percentage of Anthony's share in the divorce, and she had 4 boys with Braswell blood. What kind of concerns? I asked cautiously. Financial irregularities. Unusual transfers. The trust manipulation was just the beginning, Crystal explained. Rebecca's been moving company assets into offshore accounts for months, maybe years. I'm going to send you an encrypted email, and the password to view it is Luke's favorite fruit spelled backward, followed by your wedding month and day with Joseph. It's documentation. Enough to force an audit, possibly a criminal investigation. I stared at Crystal in amazement. Why are you helping us? Becca asked. Crystal's perfectly lined eyes smiled with her mouth. Because boss would have wanted me to pitch in. And because I've watched you grow into someone extraordinary, Becca. You're someone who deserves the chance to create her own path. With Crystal's evidence and board connections, the balance of power shifted dramatically. An emergency hearing was scheduled for the week before Christmas, with Rebecca required to produce all financial records related to the trust and company assets. The morning she was served with the new summons, Rebecca called me directly. A settlement, she proposed tersely. Becca gets her trust fund restored and can attend whatever school she chooses. In exchange, the evidence stays private, and there's no criminal investigation. And the other conditions, I pressed. A long pause. She's free to pursue her own path. Fine, but you must give control over all of the funds to Anthony and Crystal, and never have access to any of it, and that means all of the trusts, education funds, payroll, and scholarships. The only thing you control from this point on is your personal money, and you will liquidate the offshore accounts and return the money you swiped. There was another pause. Fine. I'll call Anthony and Crystal and both can tell you when it's all been done. The settlement was finalized 3 days before Christmas. Becca would start at MIT in January with her credit card and trust fund intact. Rebecca would be replaced as CFO of Braswell Enterprises, but the new person would take over with enhanced board oversight and independent trustees for all family trusts. On Christmas Eve, as our blended family gathered to celebrate, I finally felt the weight of the past months lifting. Luke and Carter argued good-naturedly about a video game while Sophia helped Manny hang ornaments on the lower branches of our tree. Joseph and I moved around the kitchen in our familiar dance of cooperation, while Anthony and his new girlfriend chatted with Crystal, who had been invited to join our celebration with her boys, who were all outside having a snowball fight with most of the neighborhood kids, and my father was supervising with Crystal's doctor boyfriend. I found Becca on the back porch, watching the stars as she often did when contemplating life's bigger questions. Second thoughts about MIT? I asked. He shook my head. No. Just thinking about what Rebecca said when she called to congratulate me on the settlement. Which was that I'm more Braswell than she expected. That my strategy and determination reminded her of her father. Becca turned to me. She meant it as a compliment, I think. But it bothers me. I considered this. You are determined like your great-grandfather. And strategic when necessary. But those traits don't belong exclusively to the Braswells. I don't want to become like Rebecca, she admitted. So focused on legacy and control that I hurt the people I love. The fact that you're worried about it means you probably won't, I said, putting an arm around her. The best protection against becoming Rebecca is remembering this feeling right now and how it felt to have someone else trying to control your destiny. From inside, we heard laughter as Manny apparently said something unexpectedly funny. The sound of our family, complex, blended, imperfect, but bound by love, reminded me of what really mattered. I've been thinking about what to study alongside engineering, Becca said. Maybe a minor in ethics or philosophy. Something to help me remember that buildings aren't just structures. They're spaces for people to connect, to live, to grow. I smiled. I think that's perfect. As we rejoined our family celebration, Becca said, I realized that the past months had taught me something essential about balance. Not just the mathematical balance of structural engineering that I would study at MIT, but the deeper balance between honoring the past and creating the future, between family legacy and personal dreams. Rebecca had tried to force me into a predetermined mold, but in fighting her control, I discovered my own strength. A strength built not on name or legacy, but on the values my mother had taught me: courage, integrity, and the determination to chart my own course. And the balance you'll seek going forward wouldn't be rigid or unchanging. It would be dynamic, responsive, like the innovative buildings you hope to design someday. Strong enough to endure storms, but flexible enough to sway with the winds of change without breaking, if I remember correctly. Her path was just beginning. And for the first time in months, I was truly excited to see where it would lead my oldest baby, even if I would still miss seeing her perfect little face.